Barbarians, Chapters 31 and Epilogue, The Price of Peace. So go ahead and hate your neighbor. Go ahead and cheat a friend. Do it in the name of heaven. You can justify it in the end. There won't be any trumpets blowing come the judgment day, on the bloody morning after one tin soldier rides away. Coven, one tin soldier. Diaksh Giaj. Guyaz slowly opened his eyes, gazing cautiously at his surroundings. He was lying on a narrow cot in a small room, while a human female in a white uniform was seated across from him, regarding him carefully. "I see you're awake, Diaksh," she informed him as he struggled to sit up. "How are you feeling?" "Better than I expected," he admitted. "Who are you?" "Admiral Helene Fujimoto," she replied, inclining her head. "Your counterpart. One of them, at least." He nodded slowly. "You commanded the fleet." A statement, not a question. "You learned quickly." "Relearned, actually," she said with a ghost of a smile. "I'm afraid we were a little out of practice." Giaj spent a few moments taking that in. "You took a great risk, splitting your forces." "You didn't leave me much choice," she replied. "No, I suppose not," he agreed. He folded his arms across his chest. "So what happens now?" Helene rose to her feet as any trace of humor disappeared from her face. "I convince you to stand down your forces, Diaksh. Without you, they are in disarray, so it would be in the best interests of everyone involved for you to give the order." He considered that for a moment. "And if I refuse?" She stared down at him without a hint of mercy. "Then I destroy them." Giaj's lip curled into a sneer. Easier said than done. "I'm willing to risk it," Helene answered. "You're far from home, Diaksh, and your fleet, what's left of it, was the bulk of your forces. Your ships can run, rebuild, and rally your people for another attack, of course. But I can assure you that when they return, we'll be waiting for them." This time it was her turn to smirk. "Our team pulled a great deal of information from your computers before they escaped." "So I suspected," he replied as he considered her demand. That she was serious he had no doubt, though whether she could manage it was another question. She was unfortunately quite correct about the question of leadership, but he was loath to simply surrender to her despite the truth of her words. His people had waited 10 millennia for this day, and to see it fail now was a far greater pain than the wound in his side. "What of my warriors?" he asked quietly. "What will become of them?" "Above my pay grade, I'm afraid. Though if you order them to stand down, I'm certain we can work something out. Eventually." "Not much of a promise," Giaj said darkly. "It's no promise at all, in fact," Helene replied. "I won't lie to you. There's plenty of people who would like nothing better than for me to pull the trigger and kill every last one of you." Her voice turned cold as ice. "You murdered billions of triumvirate citizens and thousands of humans. I doubt you'll find many advocates here." He leaned back against his pillow. "You wish my surrender? I am willing to discuss it, but not with you." Helene cocked her head. "Who then?" Giaj's smile was as enigmatic as the Sphinx as he told her. Nasat winced slightly as he was wheeled into the prisoner's hospital ward. Despite all the work Rykret had put into rebuilding his hip joint, it still throbbed with a deep ache the painkillers couldn't quite eradicate. She held his hand as they entered the small room, hovering protectively over him as he gazed curiously at the human admiral and the Konhim Diaksh. "You wanted to see me, ma'am?" Nasat asked apprehensively. "Not me," she chuckled. "Him." His bewilderment was growing by leaps and bounds as he turned to face the enemy commander. "Sergeant Nasat," Giaj said politely. "We meet again?" "Indeed so, Diaksh," he replied courteously. "You asked to speak to me?" For the life of him he couldn't imagine why. "I did," Giaj replied, his gaze traveling briefly up to Rykret's face, who in turn was staring daggers back at him. "There is something I wish to ask you, if you are willing." "Of course," Nasat answered, "though if it is of a military or technical nature, I may not be allowed to respond." Giaj shook his head. "Nothing like that. I simply wanted to know one thing, Sergeant. Why? Why did you not kill me when you had the chance?" Nasat blinked in surprise. "Because I did not wish to," he answered simply. He winced again. though this time it was due to the grip Rykrit had on his hand. He looked up at her, making a small noise in his throat to draw her attention away from the prisoner. She flushed slightly as she bowed her head, loosening her handhold on him. An exchange that did not pass unnoticed by Giage. "I ask for a reason, Sergeant," Giage said carefully. "We came here to right an ancient wrong, and I know that had our situations been reversed, I would not have hesitated to finish you." Rykret's death glare returned with a vengeance, and he nodded in understanding. "I doubt your companion would have spared me, so why did you?" Nasat wondered if anyone else knew about the incident in surgery. If not, he had no intention of bringing it up now, not in front of witnesses. "No, she would not have spared you," he admitted, though there was no hint of condemnation in his voice. "She lost her family to your warriors. Can you blame her for her anger?" "No, in fact I understand her hatred of my kind, perhaps better than you realize." Giage acknowledged Rykret with a brief bow, and while it failed to mollify her animosity towards him, she did at least dial it back somewhat. "But you have yet to answer my question, Sergeant." "I am uncertain how to put it into words, Diaksh, but I will try," Nasat said uncomfortably. "I was not raised to be soldier. In fact, I had chosen a life of contemplation, as an acolyte." Giage regarded his response with some surprise, while he continued, "Our people have only known peace for as long as we can remember, and when you brought death and destruction to us, many surrendered to despair. It was the humans who showed us how to fight," he informed him, indicating Helene. "And while their efforts saved our people from certain annihilation, we are not them. I fought because I had to, because I was given no choice, and because it was necessary. But when this war is over, no one will be more thankful than I." Nasat shrugged helplessly. "I do not hate you, Diaksh. Others do, and perhaps I should as well, but I do not. I hate what you have done, but that is not the same thing. And if I can stay my hand without putting others at risk, then I will always choose life over death." Giage was silent for some time as he digested Nasat's words. Finally, he turned back to Admiral Fujimoto, who had remained silent during their exchange. "What do you ask of me?" he said at last. "A ceasefire to start," she said at once. "An immediate cessation of hostilities as both sides fall back to their initial lines. When that has been confirmed, your forces begin withdrawing from the surface, under observation, of course." "And once we surrender the planet?" Giage pressed her. "My ships are still in orbit overhead, and they are still armed." Helene grimaced. "That's where it gets complicated, I'm afraid. I imagine that my superiors have some pretty definite ideas on what they'll want to see happen, but I cannot allow you to retain your ship's weapons. That, Diaksh, is non-negotiable." Giage's nostrils flared in sudden defiance. "And what do you offer us in return, Admiral? You ask my warriors to bare their throats to your blade, but what assurances do you give us that you will allow us to depart in peace?" The temperature of the room suddenly dropped to somewhere just shy of absolute zero. "I never said a thing about allowing you to leave, Diaksh," she said without a hint of compassion in her voice. "As long as your fleet is intact, it is a threat. I'm afraid you're not going anywhere without my approval, and if we do decide on a location, you will be escorted under the guns of my fleet." His sneer returned. "So you can march us off somewhere out of sight of your citizens to be executed like so much livestock? My warriors and I would rather die with our blades in our hands than suffer that ignominy. You may kill us, but I will not allow you to dishonor us with an animal's death." "It is all you deserve," Rykret suddenly spat out, her every word dripping with venom, while Nasat watched in horror as the fragile peace they'd started began to fall apart at the seams. "Diaksh," he said desperately, "no one wishes to see you slaughtered. Not now, at least. You said you understood why those like Rykret hated you, so surely you must understand why we are cautious to grant you any sort of parole. There must be some sort of middle ground we can find, that both sides can accept," he asked hopefully. "Sergeant," Helene said curtly, "you are here as a courtesy. I suggest you remember that." "No, let him speak," Giage interjected. "You say you wish to end hostilities, and sadly you are in a position to enforce your will for the moment. But there is a limit how far I am willing to be pushed. Either we find this middle ground he spoke of, or we fight this battle until the bitter end." The human and the Konhim glared at one another as Nasat cleared his throat. "Admiral, he did agree to the ceasefire. Perhaps we could start there? It will take time for those like Minister Singh to arrive here from the capital, but if we can stop the dying, would that not be a valuable beginning?" Helene's expression was like chewing on broken glass. "If your ships agree to stand down and move out of range of the planet, with my fleet as an escort." "Only as far as the L5 Lagrange point," he countered. "I will not leave my warriors without means to return home." She still had a decidedly sour look, but finally gave a curt nod. "Agreed, pending verification." "Agreed," Giage acknowledged. "I also have one additional request." The Admiral looked as if she was prepared to balk, before Giage pointed to Nasat. "I wish the Sergeant to be present during negotiations as a neutral party." Fujimoto snorted. "Neutral? He's one of ours." "Perhaps, but there is wisdom in his words." He turned to look at Nasat, who stared back in astonishment. "I believe he truly does wish to find peace, and he has the courage to stand his ground." Helene turned to give Nasat an appraising look. "Agreed," she said finally, as a wry smile appeared on her face. Nasat's head whipped back and forth as the others discussed his fate, before finally looking helplessly at Rykret. "Why does this keep happening to me?" he asked plaintively. "Maybe next time you'll shoot him," she snorted, as the other two broke out into laughter. "Come gather round people wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth savin', then you better start swimmin', or you'll sink like a stone for the times they are a-changin'." Bob Dylan, "The Times They Are A-Changin'." "Nasat, will you please stop fidgeting?" Rykret said, exasperated, as she readjusted the starburst medal hanging around his neck. "You look splendid in your new uniform if you'd just leave it alone." Nasat sighed in resignation as Minister Singh and Marshal Antuma shared a chuckle at his plight. "I don't understand what the issue is, Captain," Leandra said with a grin. "You were absolutely perfect at the ceremony. You should be proud." She smiled at Rykret as well. "And having your betrothed present the award was the piece de resistance. TNN's numbers are going to be huge this cycle." "Minister, while I appreciate the Tetrarchy's recognition, I would have much preferred to stay an inconspicuous sergeant," Nasat said unhappily. "I do not deserve this promotion, nor do I deserve this medal." "Captain Nasat, what you think you do or don't deserve is immaterial, I'm afraid," Antuma chimed in. "First off, I don't think you're seeing your accomplishments objectively. And secondly, we need you to be a hero." The newly promoted and decorated Sortor winced at the word hero. "I only did my duty, sir," Nasat said awkwardly, "and I was very lucky." Leandra shook her head sadly and leaned forward. "Nasat, for better or worse, you've been thrust onto a much bigger stage. I'd apologize for that, if it weren't for the fact it was my insistence, and Marshal Antuma's, that put you there. Even though the ceasefire is holding for now, in many ways we are in a much more dangerous position than we ever were, and that is where you come in." "I do not understand," Nasat replied miserably. "I am merely a soldier. There are thousands of others who were just as deserving of these honors, perhaps even more so." "Could we not give it to one of them?" Antuma burst out laughing. "Certainly, if you can find me another soldier who single-handedly captured the Konhim commander, thereby helping to end the war. Consider yourself fortunate we didn't make you a general." Nasat blanched in horror. "You wouldn't, sir, would you?" "In a heartbeat, Captain," Antuma said emphatically, as all traces of humor left his face. "The minister is quite correct. The current situation is more perilous now than it ever was, even though the fighting has stopped. And you, my friend, are our secret weapon." "Me!" Nasat squeaked. "Yes, you," Leandra informed him. "We humans are all too familiar with this kind of situation, thanks to our rather colorful past." She leaned back in her chair and regarded him thoughtfully. "Tell me, Captain, now that the Konhim have ceased their attacks and are negotiating with us to end the war, what do you think happens next?" "I had assumed they would return to their homeworld," Nasat stammered. "We would focus on rebuilding what we lost, and begin disbanding our military since it is no longer needed. He paused for a moment as he considered that. Perhaps we would retain a token force just in case. Oh boy, Minister Singh sighed, rolling her eyes. Have you got a lot to learn about how things work in the real world? She waved her hand as Nasat began to object. I don't mean that the way it sounds, but I stand by it. Let's say you're correct, that the Konhem return to their home planet, assuming we allow them that, of course. What do you think will happen then? Nasat blinked rapidly. I do not know, he admitted. I would hope they would see the error of their ways and chart a new course for their society. Leandra snorted. Hope all you want, but I can tell you right now that's not going to happen. Nasat. 10,000 years ago they were all but exterminated, and they've been nursing a grudge ever since. All this is a setback. If we allow them to return home, they'll begin rebuilding and rearming all over again. And next time we see them, they'll be 100 times nastier than they are now. He suddenly felt physically ill. Are you saying our only course is to finish what my ancestors started? Nasat looked to Raykret for support, but unsurprisingly she showed no consternation at this possibility. Not necessarily, but I won't lie to you, Captain, it could very well happen, Antima said quietly. At the very least, we'll need to keep a close eye on them, which means building up our forces to even greater levels, with even more powerful ships and deadlier weapons, and keep it there for generations to come. And that, my dear, Leandra said as she turned to Raykret, is where you come in. Me? She squawked, echoing Nasat's own earlier reaction. Singh nodded. You were the very first triumvirate citizen to volunteer for military duty, she said smoothly. We looked into your background rather closely, and we'll be relying on you to encourage others to enlist, to help foster a new tradition, one of service to the Tetrarchy. She and Nasat stared at each other in shock as they felt the walls begin to close in. And if we refuse? Nasat asked quietly. That would be unfortunate, Leandra said coolly, but I think we can help you both to see reason. Honestly, what did you think your future held? After all the publicity, and believe me, we're just getting started with that. Did you think you could retreat back into the woodwork? Retire to a farm? Raise a family in quiet anonymity? A wry smirk appeared on her face. Or perhaps return to your old order and take up the robes again? I happen to know the venerable Ishray came to see you, hoping you'd do just that. Nasat looked like he had tasted something sour. No, not that, he said in disgust. I told him that was no longer an option. Leandra chuckled. In fact, I believe you used some rather colorful language to send him packing, she grinned. I can only assume you learned those phrases from us humans. Certainly no Sartuar ever told someone to stick your offer where the sun doesn't shine. Nasat flushed with embarrassment as she shrugged. As much as you might wish to find some secluded corner of the galaxy to live out your lives, it's not in the cards, I'm sorry to say. You cannot simply order us to play these roles, Nasat said with a hint of anger, holding Raykret's hand. In fact, we can, Antima replied. You're both still in uniform after all, and if you check the fine print of your enlistment papers, you'll see they read for the duration. To be perfectly blunt, the war is over when we say it's over. Look, we're not the bad guys here, Leandra said swiftly, before Nasat could work up a hot retort. I know how all this must sound to you, and if you're seeing this as some sort of prison sentence, I'm sorry to say there's some truth to that. But we're not here to threaten you or force you to bend to our will, though in the end you may wish we had. She graced them both with a melancholy expression. No, the chains I'm ensnaring you with are far more insidious, I'm afraid. The minister rose to her feet and went to the Sartuar pair. Nasat, Raykret, we need you. The Tetrarchy needs you. Your people need you, even more now than they did before the war. I can find anyone to carry a rifle, or treat the wounded, but there is literally no one else at the moment who can offer us what you can, in terms of publicity and morale. Like it or not, it's your duty. Both of you? Nasat had been moments away from taking Raykret's hand and storming out, but the word duty brought him to a crashing halt. His heart sank as he finally recognized the trap before him, and realized there was no way they could avoid it. This is to be our life, then? He asked dispiritedly. Forced to forever be pulled by your strings? A mere performer for your publicity campaign? It won't all be bad, she assured him. For one thing, I can guarantee you two will have the biggest wedding the Triumvirate has ever seen. You'll lead parades. Your faces will be everywhere, and there won't be a single citizen that won't fawn over your every word and wish they were you. And in time, with any luck and barring a catastrophe, someday you'll have my job. Rykret shivered, and not from the cold. Nasat held her close as he glared back at the minister. And you are that certain you will be able to maintain your grip on us even then? When we could simply walk away with no one to stop us? No, Leandra said quietly, because by then you will understand the necessity of it, just as I do. A foreboding silence filled the room as they dwelled on that, until Antima spoke up. There's another reason we need you, Nasat. Two, in fact. Tell me, how would you describe the Konhim? Being completely honest, I mean. The sudden change in topic gave him pause, as he considered his answer. Warlike, all too comfortable with bloodshed, even barbaric, he said at last. The marshal nodded in agreement. Remind you of anyone? He probed. Nasat flushed. Sir, I did not mean to imply, he began as Antuma waved his apology aside. It's all right. We humans have always acknowledged our own shortcomings, he said easily. Well, mostly, Antuma added, almost as an afterthought. The thing is, we have a lot in common with the Konhim. Too much, in fact. Now that we are creating a military again, after all these years, there will be those who will want to use it. And what better enemy to test our mettle against than them? It wouldn't take much to set us off either. And if that happens, all bets are off. We could end up destroying everything we've worked so hard to achieve, unless there is someone who belongs to neither camp who can act as mediator. A dry chuckle passed his lips. Someone civilized to keep the two barbarian tribes from slaughtering each other. But it sounded as if I was to be nothing more than a figurehead, Nasat stammered. At first, perhaps, but that won't last, Antuma explained. It can't, not if there's going to be anything resembling long-term stability, which brings us to the second reason. He nodded at Leandra, who picked up the thread. Just a few months ago, humans were treated like unruly children in the Triumvirate, she said caustically. Fear of the Konhim changed the equation, and we shamelessly took full advantage of it. We earned our new position, and we are not giving it up, not without a fight. Nasat barely managed to repress a shudder. So, we have simply exchanged one threat for another? He said in despair. I hope not, Nasat, but like Kwasi, I too know my people. Once we get our hands on power, we don't give it up, unless there is someone there to speak for the other races, someone they trust, someone who's proven themselves strong enough to stand against even the most formidable of enemies. And for better or worse, that's you. How can you place all of this on my shoulders? Nasat demanded. I am only one being, and even with Rykret at my side, I cannot do all that you demand of me. You ask too much. You'll need to gather people you trust, of course, Antuma nodded. Build up your own power base, one separate from ours. In fact, I believe I can help with that. He smirked, before pressing a hidden button. Show him in, please, he spoke into the intercom. The doors slid open as a human in uniform marched in, coming to a halt in front of the incredulous pair of Sortuars. Sergeant Jehiel Lin reporting for duty, sir. Nasat stared in shock. You? But you're human. Think of me as being on indefinite loan, Lin said with a smile. Besides, you'll need someone to teach you all the dirty tricks they'll throw at you, he said, jerking his head towards the other humans. Unless, of course, you'd rather not have me on your staff. Nasat slowly rose to his feet. Nothing would honor me more than to have you at my side, he said hoarsely, suddenly overcome with emotion. He held out his hand in the human way as Lin grasped it firmly. I will find it difficult to have you calling me sir, however, he admitted. You'll get used to it, sir, Lin smirked. After all the hammer blows they'd been hit with, Rykret could no longer contain herself. But we won the war, she blurted out. How can it end like this? Marshal Antuma sighed. No, we won the battle, he said quietly. The war, I'm afraid, is just beginning. The end.